Hear that, everybody? I'm afraid that's all I got. These are cheap plastic sleigh bells, probably 70 years old. They came from my mom's Christmas tree. We inherited them years ago. Why am I doing this? Why am I ringing the cheap plastic sleigh bells? Because if I look out my office door, I can see a Christmas tree. And when I can look out my office door and see a Christmas tree, that means it's time for our annual year-end episode, if you will. Episode, I think is a pretty good word. Episode of the virtual user group meeting that we affectionately call the water cooler, and that is where you are right now. My name is Paul. I am a nerd. It is the November 2011 water cooler, which is our name for the virtual user group meeting, and today we are talking about ending the year. Now, of course, it's only November, but if we were to have this conversation at our next meeting in December, I think what you'd find is that did I go out? Am I back? Yeah, what you'd find is that it'd be too late. So today we are going to talk about ending the year in tabs and trust and accounts payable and general ledger, and hopefully cover all your questions and give you all the information that you need to do all the things that you need to do to end your year properly. Now, for those of you that I see on the list of attendees that have been here before, it probably will be a little bit boring because we cover pretty much the same things every year. There may be a couple new things this year that are brought about by recent versions of the software, but for all intents and purposes, ending the year in the STI software is pretty much the same year after year after year. And a little bit of housekeeping first. You have a box that's over on the right-hand side of your screen. It is probably a big box that has all sorts of buttons and things in it, and jutting off to the left of it is probably a much smaller box that has a couple buttons in it. The button at the top looks like arrows that point to the right. If you have that button that looks like arrows pointing to the right, that means you also have the big box, and pressing that button with the arrows pointing to the right will slide that big box out of the way so that if it is covering up part of my screen, you will then be able to see all of my screen. Once you do that, that button that was arrows pointing to the right will become a button that looks like arrows pointing to the left, and you guessed it, you press it again, and that big box slides right out. Why would you want to slide that big box right out? Most of you know this. It's because you're shy and you want to type your question instead of raising your hand. So when you slide that big box back out, there is a place to type questions. You type those questions. Our humble moderator, Leanne, will read them and make sure that we get them answered. And if instead you'd rather just ask your question live, kind of get your moment in the limelight, you will want to simply click on the button that's over to the left that looks like a hand with an arrow pointing upwards in front of it, and that means you're raising your hand. Leanne will notice you've raised your hand. We will unmute you. We will let you ask your question and make sure it gets answered properly, and then we'll mute you back up so that you can finish eating lunch. And so with that, I'm going to start with a little bit of theory, and then we're going to let Mary Jo just plain end the whole rest of the virtual user group meeting with all the fun stuff that is the actual things that you do at the end of the month. Now, to start with theory, a couple things I want to cover. One is that in the general ledger, you currently have 3 years worth of stuff, journal entries. Now, of course, that's assuming that you've been using the software for 3 years. Those years, of course, would be 2009, 2010, 2011. Now, when you close 2011 so that you can move into 2012, you are going to be dropping all the journal entries that are in the system, all the detail for 2009. What that means is, now Mary Jo is going to go over how to kind of make a backup copy of that stuff so that at any time later you can go back to it if you need. We call it making another client, another general ledger client. But if you have unreconciled stuff from 2009 and you go and close 2011, that stuff that has not been reconciled will drop out in an unreconciled state, and you will have a bit of a mess on your hands. Not a huge mess, but certainly not a small mess either. So you want to make sure that all your checks that have been written that have not been reconciled, perhaps they got sent to the IRS or the clerk of courts or to a client as a refund or whatever, and the client or the clerk of courts or the IRS never cashed them, and of course they're no good anymore because checks are only good for, I believe, 6 months, sometimes 3 months, maybe as much as a year, but certainly not 3 years, or 2 years, I should say. You want to get those out of there. You want to void these posted checks and get them out of there. If you have a deposit that was maybe included a payment that never was reconciled, or anything that is unreconciled that's in there from 2009, you want to get it out of there, okay? Most often that means you have checks that have been written but never cashed, and they need to be voided. Now, in accounts payable, you can print a check register, and you can see what's out there that's unreconciled from 2009 very easily. Do that. Now, Mary Jo will probably touch on that, and if she doesn't, you can certainly call us or email us and ask us where to go to do that. But basically, you're just printing a check register for that time period with unreconciled as being the type of checks that you're printing. Now, with that comes another bit of theory. In the olden days, moving from month to month and from year to year was set in stone. Okay? And by that I mean when you closed your year, you had to be sure your year was ready to be closed. Now, I've talked about this before, especially with regard to month-end close. It's the same thing with closing the year. That no longer is something that sets worlds in stone. It merely means we are moving from 2011 into 2012. So when you close your year, it does not mean you can't go back and print a statement from 2011, or that you can't make a prior year's journal entry, or that you can't write a check or make a manual entry for a check that was written in 2011, even though you've closed the year 2011. So another bit of theory for you then is don't freak out or fret about closing your year. For those of you who've been doing this forever, like me, it used to cause great consternation, and so therefore for a lot of people it still does, but it shouldn't. Because all you're really doing now is saying, hey, it's not 2011 anymore, it's 2012, so let's make the software aware of the fact that the current period is 2012, okay? And my final bit of theory for you has to do with accountants and time. Invariably, what's going to happen in, let's say March, just for giggles, is that your accountant is going to call you on the telephone or send you an email and say, I need to know this exact number from the end of last year. I need to know what your accounts receivable was on January 1st, 2012 or December 31st, 2011. I need to know what the balance of this account was at the end of the year. I need to know what this was on the end of the year. I need you to run an accounts receivable report for the end of the year. Now, the problem is they don't ask you these questions at the end of the year. They ask you these questions in March, sometimes in April. A few of you have accountants that ask them in February, and a very, very small group of you have accountants that ask these questions in January. But I don't know many accountants like that, and I don't have many clients that have accountants like that. So what's that mean? Well, if it's March and you've gone through 2 month-end closes and 2 billing cycles, and you're into your 3rd since you closed the year, it's very hard to tell what certain things are at that point in time, that magical end of your time. So what's our solution? We've been talking about it for years, and it's very simple. Now, Mary Jo is going to talk to you about making backups, simply because when you close your year, it's good to have a backup. And you do that using the backup that's within the software. You just, when you go to close the year, it's going to say, hey, are you sure you want to do this without backing up? And you'll say, no, let's back up. If you have a hot backup, it goes to one area. If you have a regular backup and a normal multi-user or single user, it goes to another area. But nonetheless, you make a backup. Now, why doesn't that backup work for this purpose? Because in order to get back to those numbers, to get back to that theoretical point in time, you have to restore the backup. Now, you can restore a backup to a directory other than the one that you have the software in. But if you do that, it's very, very difficult to do. And if you instead go through the steps that STI has given you to back up and restore that back up to a different directory, very difficult to do that, and if you don't do that, you're wiping out everything that's already there. Okay? So you can do that. You can take a backup that you've made within the software using the hot backup or the regular backup, and you can get it to where you can look at this stuff, but it's kind of like a switching back and forth sort of thing, and it's kind of like walking a tightrope. So we can suggest something much, much, much simpler. I'm going to go to my online hosted desktop. There we go. And I'm going to go out to my computer, and I'm going to go to my network drive, and I am going to show you that this is the STI directory, and I'm going to show you that if I take this and hit right-click on it and hit copy, and then right-click down here and choose paste, it will make me a copy of my STI directory. Now, a couple things. You got to have everybody out of the software. You got to be sure that everybody's out of the software. So, for instance, if you go into Tabs and you go into View, and you can see this anywhere, Active User List, and choose All Systems, and you got other people in there, get them out of there. It won't work if there are people in the software. Another thing, and this is something to write down because you may not understand it, you have to make sure that all open files in that directory are closed on the server. Now, what does that mean? It means that occasionally servers get confused and think that files are open that aren't, even though you know that all the people are out of the software and therefore files could not be open. So whoever your nerd is, and I say that only in the nicest way because I am one, whoever your nerd is, whether it be somebody from offsite or somebody that's there in your office, needs to make sure before you do this that your open files are closed on the server for that STI folder and everything underneath. If there are any open files, this whole thing will fail. Now, if you're in a big firm, like some of my clients have situations where making this copy would take 2 hours. So there's nothing worse than having this 2-hour copy be 90% done, having the whole thing fail and fall on its face because there was an open file. So A, you want to make sure that nobody's in the software and that nobody goes in the software while you're doing this, and B, you want to make sure you have no open files in the system that will keep this from progressing and playing out the way it should. Now, if I were to do this, this would take about 5 or 10 minutes. So it really has a lot to do with how big the data set is, what you're using, if you're using Practice Master also, if you're doing that, or you're storing attachments and emails. That's one of the things that takes up a lot of space and makes this take a while. Now, why do you do this? Very simple. Once you've got this copy of STI, and there's a trick if you've got Platinum, I'll just tell you very quickly that if you go in and find the stserver.cfg file and rename it in your copy, then it will run. Okay, this is going to go over everybody's head. But again, for your IT people, in order to run the software in that copy, you need to do something. You need to rename a file. So just have those IT people contact me or Mary Jo, and we will tell them what they need to do. But the point is, once you've made this copy, you can go there at any point without disturbing the other software, without kicking people out of it, without storing anything, without doing anything, and you will be on January 31st, 2011. Now, of course, that has to do with your having made the copy on January 1st or January 1st or December 31st. I just said January 31st, didn't I? January 1st or December 31st. You want to make sure to do this at exactly the right time. Okay? Now, those are my 3 theoretical things. GL journal entries for 29 will drop. Make sure you have them all reconciled. You don't need to fret about closing the year. You can do it and still go back and do all the things that you may not be quite done doing, so just go ahead and do it. And by all means, whenever you can, January 2nd, whenever you're in the office for the first time, make sure to grab that snapshot of your data so you can answer those questions your accountant's going to wait 3 months to ask you. Now, that all that is said and done, I'm going to turn everything over to Mary Jo, and she's going to take the next 15 to 20 to 30 minutes, so we may run a little long today, a little bit of warning, and she's going to go through just about everything there is to know about the actual nuts and bolts of closing your year. Mary Jo?
Okay, everybody, how are you today? I am going to just add to Paul's just real quick. If you're running a version prior to 14.1, you're not going to have 3 years of data. You're only going to have 2. So that's 2010 and 2011. So just make a note that if you have 14-1 or earlier, you're going to lose that year before. So you're going to want to still do the same procedures, just know you're going to have a year before. Instead of 3 years, you only have 2. I'm going to go through each program and just kind of give you an overview of some of the steps and reports and things like that that you need to run in each different module. So I'm going to start with tabs, and some of the things are going to go for all programs. So if they are, I'm going to just tell you that it's for all, and I'm not going to say it each time I get to that program. So the first thing that, like Paul said, you're going to want to make an internal backup. And as soon as you make that internal backup, that's going to back up all of the programs, the tabs, trust, AP, GL. It's not separated out unless you've got a really old version, and then you do need to do each individual one. But in this case, make up internal backup. You're going to run the data file integrity checks just like you would at month end for all the programs. In tabs, you also have the archive integrity check, so you're going to want to run that. That should also be done at the end of each month, but again, at the year end, you're going to run that as well. You're going to want to print all the pre-update statements reports. Look at that, see if there's any statements out there that have been final billed but not updated yet. That happens quite a bit, so you want to make sure before you advance your year that those are all cleaned up and either billed or unbilled, depending, updated or unbilled, whichever you want to do there. You're going to want to update any statements. We just talked about that. Anything that was final billed, you're going to want to make sure that those have been updated. You're going to want to print any accounts receivable, management, productivity reports that you use. Those same thing at the end of the month that you would do. You're going to do that at year end. Make sure you get your unallocated payments report, all of those things printed and done. Let's go back to, we're going to advance your current reporting month, so then you're going to go ahead and advance tabs to the following year. And then you're also going to want to print a timekeeper list that includes any timekeeper overhead amounts, if that's what you're using. A lot of people aren't aware that tabs does have that, but you can keep track of your overhead for each attorney. You're going to want to print that and then make those adjustments as well. So if you're upping that overhead for the following year, you're going to want to go ahead and do that, review them, and edit those as necessary. I do want to make a note that everything that I'm talking about is in the knowledge base. I have articles in here for all of it, and an article that will give you a link to all of these is R10429, and we'll include that when we, I'm sorry, Paul, let me show you how to get there. So if you go to Help, and you go to Internet Resources, and then you go to the knowledge base, if you click on that, it opens a web window, and then you can go in there and you can type in the search that article number. And again, it's R10429. And I just go over here to the search tab, and you type that article number right in there, and it will give you a link to each of the programs. So if you don't have tabs and you don't need to do this, you don't have to print or look at that overview. But there will be a list of all of those, and might as well just go there for you. And you'll see here there's the tabs, general ledger, accounts payable, and trust. So there's all of these articles that I'm talking about, and all the procedures are listed in there. There's also, I'm going through just the year-end procedures, but there's also frequently asked questions. So if you get into this and you're like, where do my productivity totals go? When does it clear it? There's actually questions and answers there for you, so it goes into a little bit more depth. So that's tabs. I'm going to go on to trust. Trust, again, data file integrity check. You've already made your backup. You can run the bank account reconciliation, make sure that everything is in line there. Print a check register by check number. Print the check register by trust account or by payee, whichever you normally do. You're going to want to print a voided checklist. And then if you're integrating with accounts payable, you have the ability to merge your 1099 information. So if you have 1099s that you need to do for trust and you want to merge it with any AP vendors that you have over there with the same name, you can merge that by running and creating the APS 1099 merge file. If you don't, you just want to print your 1099 information, you can do that in trust and get that information and print those forms. I'll go there very quickly and show you that there is a 1099 tab, and you can go ahead and do a report to look at it. You can print your forms directly from here, or this is where you would create that 1099 merge file to merge with AP. If you want to purge any transactions for the year, you can also set those to purge and then purge them out. Not really necessary unless you've got a huge data set and you've just got a lot of data you need to get out of there. But most of the time I don't see a lot of people that need to worry about purging data. So that's trust. Any questions with tabs and trust? I know I'm moving kind of fast, but I'm going to try and get you out of here as close to the time as we can. Any questions? Nope? Okay. Accounts payable. I'm going to move on to that. Again, data file integrity check. You're going to want to post any checks. Make sure that those are all done. Make sure that the posting cutoff date is at least the last day of the month. So if it's December 31st, before you do that, make sure that you've posted everything through there. You're going to want to print the check register report, your voided checklist. Again, this is on that voided checklist. If you've got anything that you need to void, you're going to want to make sure that it's showing up on there if it's older than the 3 years that it's keeping, or the 2 if you're in an earlier version. You can print the vendor analysis report. Again, these are all under reports, and you can print these in here. Vendor analysis report is going to give you all of the activity that has happened for each vendor, so you're going to want to look at that. Print your paid invoice by vendor report. Print your 1099 reports. Again, in AP, there's a 1099 screen right here. So you've got your 1099 report and your 1099 forms that you can print right here. You're going to want to run the Clear Vendor Analysis Totals program. So at the end of the year, when you're ready to start fresh for the next year, you'll run that Clear Vendor Analysis report, and then that will go ahead and, vendor reports. And, sorry, it's moved, different place, go into utilities. So you're going to want to go make sure that you run that report there. And if I can find it, I'll show you where it is. Vendor analysis report. I think I'm pulling a Paul here. Oh, gosh. All right, I've totally lost it. I'm not sure where it is now. I'm looking for our Clear Vendor Analysis program. I think it's under, I saw it earlier today, so I'm not sure where maybe it's on my main screen. Anyway, it's here. Is it under month-end year in there? Oh, duh, hello. We have to get under there. There we go. Clear Vendor Analysis Totals. There we go. So you're going to want to run that. That's going to zero everything out, so it'll be fresh for your next year. One of those days. Run the data file integrity check again, like I said, after you've done all these, just to make sure that you still don't have errors. So you're going to run it before you begin and then after, just to make sure. And then you're also going to want to re-back up after you're done with all of these as well. So there you go, accounts payable. Going to move on to general ledger. General ledger is a little bit more involved. You got a lot more information over here, and we want to make sure that everything is there. So you're going to want to, if you're using reoccurring entries, if you're using any kind of reoccurring entries, journal entries, you're going to want to post all those before the end of the year. If you're integrating with PenSoft or any other payroll software, you're going to want to make sure that you've posted all of your payroll. So be careful with that. If you've got a check that you need to do before the end of the year, post payroll, you're going to want to do that before we advance. So make sure that you post all those. Post the Tabs3 accrual entries if you're using accrual. I don't know too many of our firms that are using that, but if you do have an accrual journal entries that you need to post, you're going to want to do that. You're going to want to reconcile any of your bank statements. So make sure that is finished. Print your monthly journals and your general ledger report. Make sure everything is correct there. Make any appropriate journal entry changes if they're necessary. So after you've reviewed that, if anything is out of balance, if something isn't right, you're going to want to make sure that those are adjusted. And then any adjusting year-end journal entries that you need to make, you're going to want to do that. Now, again, like Paul said, you can advance your year and come back and do that, because a lot of times your accountants aren't going to have that information until at least February, March. They're going to tell you to go ahead and adjust everything, and these will give you that. So and that will be like your retained earnings, things like that that you need to post too. You're going to want to print the trial balance, the balance sheet, your income statement, all of those reports that your accountants need. You're going to want to print that out for the end of the year. Of course, the general ledger report for the entire year, and make sure that you do it for all your accounts and all the departments. So if you're using departments, don't forget to do those by department. You're going to want to do the journal report for the same thing, for the entire year for all the accounts, departments, and journals. print the journal entry verification lists, and then after you've printed them, make sure that you delete them and clear those out so that they're fresh for the next year. And again, run the data file integrity check, make sure there's no errors, back everything up inside, and, like I said, Paul's going to have you make that complete backup, so, by copying that folder, so you can do that. Make sure that there's no outstanding journal entries. Now, Paul talked about that a little bit, with the voided checks. If you have to void a check that's going to be over 2 years old or whatever that would be and when it's going to fall off, make sure that you go through each of the journal entries as well. If you've got some manual journal entry you've made for a deposit or for a deduction and it has not been reconciled, you're going to want to make sure that those are cleared off as well, because once those fall off, that's it. You can't get those back. We'll have to make an adjusting entry.
Mary Jo.
Question?
Yes, I have a question. This is from Bill. Can you print the previous year's 1099s after clearing the vendor analysis?
I don't know if you can do it after you've cleared the vendor analysis. If you've cleared that, all that data would be gone. So I'll check that, and we'll get back to you on that, Bill, because I'm not. To me, it makes sense that it would not be there, but let me double check and make sure that it isn't anywhere else. But you would have it in your backup. So if you did need to go back and get that information, you could. Other questions?
No other questions yet?
Okay. You're going to want to archive your current client. I'm going to go over that in a little bit more detail in just a second. I'm going to finish the end of the year procedures, and I'm going to show you how to archive your current general ledger client. Everybody has a general ledger client that you're working out of. I'm going to show you how to just take that and journal or create an archive of all of that data. So if you ever do need to go back in and get journal entry information or any of that activity, you can. But for right now, I'm going to move on, and then I'll come back and show you how to do that in detail. You're going to run the advanced current posting month at this point, and that way you will go ahead and advance to the following year. And then you're going to make any journal entries for the following months as desired. So if you run this and you advance your month into January, you can go ahead and do January's journal entries. You're okay there. After you've done that, you're going to go ahead and make any adjusting journal entries for the prior year. And if you've made an archive of your general ledger client, you're going to have to make those entries in the archive as well, because once you've archived it, it's going to take a picture of what your general ledger is at that point in time. So if your accountant gives you those journal entries to adjust in February, you're going to have to adjust that archive client as well. So just keep a note of that. Any financial statements at the end of the year that you're going to want, make sure that you print those. And then also edit any budget figures for the next year if you're using the budget program. So those are kind of the basics for general ledger. I'm going to show you how to archive. So we're going to go into GL. And the first thing that we want to do...
Let me just interject real quickly. This is different than what I'm talking about, because what I'm talking about for your accountant to ask their questions 3 months later is just for that. You're probably going to get rid of the copy that I'm talking about after you're sure that you're all done with your tax returns and everything the accountant needs for that year. This archive is going to be there 10 years from now, or 5 years from now, or 15 years from now. So you want to make sure that you do this and you keep it as opposed to the one I was talking about. Go ahead, Mary Jo.
Okay. Yeah, as Paul said, that is a temporary backup that we're talking about, copying that whole STI folder. This will be forever until you delete it. So this is an archive client. It's going to capture everything. So we're going to go into Setup, and we're going to look at our GLS client, and you'll see that you have, right now I have 2, but if you do the drop down here, you can see how many you have. We've got our attorney computer systems, and we've got some demo data. You might have 10 of them in here, and it might say, GLS 2010, GLS 2011, whatever that would be. You could have several different ones if you've been archiving regularly. And if that's the case, great. If you're new into this, you took over from somebody and you see all those, but you don't know how they got there, that's what I'm going to show you how to make. So that's how you can start, by telling if you've got any in there, how many you have already, that kind of thing. Now, you have to create, it only gives you enough numbers here as to what you're using. So right now I've got 1 and 2. I don't have a third one to archive to. So I'm going to go to my limits right here, click on that, and I'm going to set my new limit to 3. and just up it to the next available number to give me a new open GLS client. So now if I do the drop down, I've got unused here. So you're going to have an unused one in here. And if that's, hopefully it's the next available number. If you've got a bunch of stuff in there that you're overriding or whatever, just let me know. If you've got unused, 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 that just means somebody set your limits to, 5 or 10, and they're just waiting to be used. So if you've got them there, great. If you need to create one, just click limits, change it to the next available highest number, and there you go. Okay? So once we've got that, I'm going to go in and I'm going to change this to number 3, to the unused. Say OK. And then I have to give it a name. So in this case, I'll just do GLS 2011. Okay. The data path, we can just, we don't want to give it the same name as what we have now. So, and this could be the year that falls off too. I have some firms that do that. They might want this to be 2009 because technically that's the year that's going to fall off and that's the year that you're archiving. So if you want to change that to that particular year, if you want it the year that you're doing it, that's up to you. But we want to have some kind of a name in here for that. The path needs to be something that is not your current working directory. So if you leave it blank, I believe it'll just create one for you, or you can just create something that is 2009 GL, something that's going to be, that where you can find that information. Okay? And then we're going to go ahead and save that. And it's going to ask me, do I want to create it? Yes. And then it's going to ask me if I want to copy the existing client's chart of accounts. I'm going to go ahead and say yes. And now it's going to ask me which client do I want to copy. So I want to copy my demo data, so I'm just going to say number 2. And you can do the drop down. It's going to list all of your current GLS clients that you have. Most of you are going to have number 1 be your default client, and that's going to be your current working directory. Paul and I are working in a demo system, so we've got number 2 set up as demo, so that's the one I'm going to copy. But all of you, your client number 1 should be your default, and it should be your current working directory. So you're going to choose number 1. Okay? Once you've chosen that, it's going to ask you what you want to copy down here. Now, if you want to copy all of your account balances, the journal entries, reoccurring entries, then you're going to check all these boxes. Now, some of you might not use reoccurring entries. That's fine. I just check all 3. That way, just in case I had them, they're there, and I'm copying that whole database. If you don't copy journal entries, you're going to lose the information. So if you want to go back in, if you want to go do a reconciliation in January, and you can't because they will be gone if you don't save that in your backup. So just make sure that you have these checked for all 3. Say OK. Copy is completed. And now, if I go in to my drop-down, I now have my GLS for 2009. And if I change to see that information, I just need to go into my Select GLS client. And anytime I want to get into that archived information, I can just come in here and change this to my number 3. I don't want to make it my default. I just want to view it. So I'm going to change and view 2003. And now if I go into any of my journal entries, any of my general ledger reports, any of those things, they're all going to be that backup copy that I made at that point in time. So I would be able to see any of my information, any of my journal records, everything is in that archive. Are there questions on how to make that? I know I went through that kind of quick, but no questions? Okay. So that's where you're going to make that, and that will be in there now until, like I said, I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, however many of those backup archive GLS clients I've made will be in there. And if you make changes after the first of the year, don't forget to make it in there. You'll have to change your GLS client to number 3, make the same journal entry in there to post anything that you needed to post, and then you can make it in your live data as well. And then don't forget to change it back to your live data. So, okay? Okay, go ahead.
I'm pulling up the question here. One moment, please.
Everyone, this is Leanne, the new girl. Can't say that anymore after next month.
except I'm having trouble opening up my question from Rebecca. I'm sorry, Rebecca. Hold on. There it is. I have it.
Just when I was going to
Oh,
ask if
I saved it from a joke. This is this just done for GLS, or can you do this for accounts payable and tabs?
No, the archiving is just for general ledger. Now the backup that Paul's talking about, getting that picture, copying that whole folder and being able to go in and access the information, that is key, because there are some reports that after the end of the year are no longer accurate because they're constantly changing. So you go in January to go try to print a report for productivity or something, and it's changed. It's different because it's live, it's in motion. You can't go back and get, what December's was. It's done. It's added to it.
And for all intents and purposes, you could keep that backup forever also. It's so much bigger and has so much more data in it that it's typically not something that you would do.
So you would have access in that copy. You're just going to open the software just like you were working in your live data, and print that report that you need for the end of the year in tabs or AP or whatever. So that's the way to get that information back out. Now, it's always good to print all of those reports before you advance anyway, but, if you spill your coffee on it or something and you need to get a report, And now with the print-to-file options, a lot of times you can just print those reports to a file and you've got them. So, if that's working, that's fine, but just make sure that you print everything that you're going to need, or you're going to be out of luck because you can't go back and get it. Other questions? All right, I didn't go too far over, so
No, you did good.
You did pretty good. So
you did better than I would have, because I like to babble and tell lawyer jokes. Well, that is it. That is all that we know to tell you about year-end. Mary Jo is motioning to me. And
don't forget the meeting change.
Right.
19th, so.
Right. We decided we are not going to have our last virtual user group meeting of 2011 on Christmas Day, because that is the last Monday of 2011 and of December of 2011. We also are not going to move it to a Tuesday because people are so used to them being on Monday. So look for next month's virtual user group meeting, water cooler, on December 19th, was it, Mary Jo, I believe? The Monday before Christmas, as opposed to Christmas Day, obviously. Well, no, that would be the Monday after Christmas. Christmas is on Sunday, but of course everyone is taking Monday off, the 26th. We will not have it then. We will have it on the 19th. So until then, unless one last call for questions, Leanne, should I tell a lawyer joke while we check?
Go ahead,
Mary
Paul.
Jo's shaking her head. Leanne is saying no. So no lawyer jokes. If anybody does think of any questions, of course, you can always reach us at paul.purdue or maryjo.boyd, not Blum, Boyd. She got married, and you can still send email to that old address, but it'll chastise you and tell you that she's married to a wonderful man named, what's his name? So yeah, maryjo.boyd at attorneycomputersystems.com or paul.purdue at attorneycomputersystems.com. We'll be sure to get those answered. And other than that, we will see you all next month. Thanks much, everybody. Have a good day.